Stocks on Wall Street end mixed as traders look past a trade deal announced between the US and the European Union. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq eke out gains while the Dow closes lower. A big week lies ahead as the 1st August tariff deadline looms and the street awaits the Fed decision and the jobs data. Markets in Asia have opened lower as traders are awaiting an outcome from the US and China's trade talks in Sweden. The GIFT Nifty is also indicating a lower start for our own markets. Oil prices have climbed on the European Union trade deal, the potential US-China tariff truce extension, and President Donald Trump's shorter deadline for Russia to end the Ukraine war. Gold prices fall to the lowest in nearly 3 weeks as the deal boosts risk appetite ahead of the Fed meeting this week. And in key results, IndusInd Bank's first quarter net profit beat expectations despite falling 72% on an annualized basis. In key earnings today, watch out for numbers from L&T. The company is expected to report 14% growth in revenue, while for Asian Paints, the revenue and profits are likely to show a downtick. Good morning, you're watching Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18 in the Mumbai News Centre. I am Hormuz Patakia. Let's first start off by taking a look at how the Asian markets have started off, and it does not look a pretty picture. The indices are trading in the red as of now. The Hang Seng trading with cuts of around 0.7%, and the Taiwanese index also trading below the flat line. Losses also coming from both Japan as well as South Korea. The Japanese index, which is the Nikkei, is down almost 0.6%. The KOSPI in South Korea too is trading with losses of well over 1% now, and it is the biggest underperformer across the Asia Pacific as of today's trade. And of course, seeing some profit booking from elevated levels as KOSPI has been an outperformer so far, gaining almost 35% on a year-to-date basis. Pull up the GIFT Nifty and that will give you an idea of how our own markets are likely to start off. Well, no relief in sight as of now. The implied open suggesting a 42-point downtick after the 160 points that the Nifty lost in yesterday's trading session. Today, of course, happens to be the monthly expiry of all the sensex related contracts, so we need to keep an eye out on that as well. But that's what we have on the global markets front, because the US markets were largely quiet all through yesterday's trade. And how would that affect our own markets? Well, our research team is joining in with the trade setup and of course the stocks that you need to keep an eye out for in today's trading session. But you know, it was yet another day of losses for our own markets, and the Nifty, after seeing a bit of a recovery at the earlier part of the session, it was a very volatile session, but eventually ending close to the lows of the day. Now, the last 3 sessions, the index has declined almost 550 points from the highs that it made last week, which was around the 25,250 mark. And the other worrisome factor is that making lower lows on the daily charts. And what would not please the bulls, of course, the fact that we closed, we were almost touching the 24,858, almost 900 levels yesterday, but we closed near the lows of the day. Every recovery is getting sold into, and the Nifty Bank fell almost 450 points yesterday, despite both HDFC Bank and ICICI Bank ending higher. 2 of the biggest index constituents ended higher, yet the index fell 450 points. Now, some of the triggers for today's session, of course, will be reacting to the IIP data that came out yesterday. Of course, it's a backdated data, so you can't see a much significant reaction to that. And there are more earnings reporting today. Earnings reactions also will come in from last evening. You need to keep an eye out for that. As I mentioned, it's the monthly expiry today for the sensex contracts. And of course, any further pressure on the IT stocks that are already entering oversold territory, you keep an eye out for that. Now, earnings reactions, IndusInd Bank came out with numbers yesterday. Massgaon Dock came out with numbers yesterday. Both these stocks ended at the lowest point of the day before the results were announced. Also keep an eye out for earnings reactions on Vari Energies and GAIL. Now, some of the important levels to watch. Now, we closed below the June 16 low of 24,703. Now, that brings in the 13th June low, which is 24,473, which is where we reversed during the Israel-Iran war. So, important levels to track for the index. The GIFT Nifty for now is indicating a negative start for our own markets. But over to Upasna now, who would be listing out the stocks that you need to keep an eye out for today. Upasna, good morning.
Good morning. First up, let me start with IndusInd Bank. Overall numbers were above pole, but weakness continues in the asset quality of the bank. NII down about 14%. GNPA stood at 3.6 versus 3.1% sequentially. Next up is GAIL. Overall, the numbers were below our poll. The net profit down 8% on a sequential basis. Revenue also down about 1% sequentially. NTPC Green Energy, overall good set of numbers. Net profit up 59% on a Y-on-Y basis and revenue up about 18% on a Y-on-Y basis. Next up is Masgao Dock on our radar. Net profitability in Q1 was impacted due to higher expenses, which is why net profit was down about 35% on a Y-on-Y basis and revenue saw an uptick of nearly about 11% on a Y-on-Y basis. Next one on our radar is KC International. Net profit up 42% on a Y-on-Y basis. Revenue also up 11% on Y-on-Y basis. Torrent Pharma is the next up on our radar. Overall, if we look at the results, they are in line with estimates. Net profit up 20%, revenue up nearly about 11% on a Y-on-Y basis. Vadi Energies is the next one on our counter. Overall, good set of numbers. Revenue up 30%. EBITDA margins expanded from 16.2% to 22.5% on a Y-on-Y basis. Adani Total Gas is the next one with net profit down nearly about 4% on a Y-on-Y basis, while the revenue saw an uptick of nearly about 20% on a Y-on-Y basis. And lastly, PNC Infra also on our radar as the company bags order worth 2,957 from Southeastern Coalfields Limited. So all in all, lot of results that we'll be watching out for today.
A lot of results and result reactions as well. Upasana, thank you for that. And lastly, Mangalam joins in with cues from the F&O space. Mangalam, good morning. Yet another lower close, but what's the F&O data indicating now?
Well, there is yet another lower close, and the interesting part is that during expiry week, it is usually the momentum takes over, and momentum is definitely firmly with the bears this time around. Recoveries were sold into yesterday. There was a sharp sell-off that we saw on the frontline indices, and alongside that, you had advanced decline ratios as well. We ended at the widest difference between the red and the green lines, with almost 2,200 stocks declining for about 490 stocks which were advancing. At one point that number was 1,400, and then thereafter we saw a wide gap up out there as well. Volatility has spiked. Remember, it was at very low levels, pricing in complacency. Now it's gone back to above 12 levels, which is interesting. So over the last two trading sessions, the VIX has spiked by about 20%, and that makes option writers' life easier, but they're writing a lot more calls. Let's talk about the cash market flows. The FI sold about 6,000 crores in cash yesterday. The DIs went ahead and bought 6,700 crores. But in index futures, they've been continuously selling lock, stock and barrel. Yesterday as well, nearly 1,200 crore worth selling. The net exposure now stands at a short 1.65 lakh contracts and longs just at 15%. And that's not all. We've been talking about how there's been a lot of call selling yesterday as well. That continued. 61,000 short calls initiated versus just 22,000 short puts initiated. Over the last two trading sessions, there have been nearly 2.5 lakh calls that the FIs have written versus just about 80,000 puts that they've written. And the put call ratio, which was anyway lower at 0.7, has gone further lower to 0.64, telling you that at some point there is a bounce which is imminent, but immediate triggers are lacking. If you look at, the active options, 24,800 call writers, fairly active. What it's telling you is that the ceiling is coming down for the market. 24,700 call writers equally active as well. But at the lower level, we are seeing put writers active at 24,600 and 24,500. What does all of this mean in terms of a range? You're looking at some support come by around that 24,550 to 24,650 mark. Congestion as we cross the 24,800 to 24,850 mark, very close to yesterday's high. The 50-day moving average on the Nifty bank is extremely crucial to track, because it broke below that yesterday despite some of the heavyweights doing well. Can it cross past that? Once it does, only then can one look at even the Nifty and the other indices.
The one important bit that Mangalam highlighted, lack of positive triggers. That is what is keeping the markets under pressure currently as well. Mangalam, thank you for that update. And some earnings now, and the big one from last evening was IndusInd Bank, and after the loss that it reported in the fourth quarter, all eyes were whether the lender reports profitability or not. Gaurav is joining in with a review of the numbers. Gaurav, good morning. How were the numbers for IndusInd Bank?
Well, as even for IndusInd Bank, we could say it was lacking some positive triggers. So let's take through the numbers first. Net interest income declined by 14%. When it comes to net interest margin, we saw a little bit of good number of around 3.46%, because Street was expecting around 3.2% net interest margins on a normalized basis. There was an impact of 11 basis points. It was positive impact, but that was a one-off impact. But even if we exclude that, NIMs were a little bit higher. When it comes to operating profit, that declined almost by 35%, a little better than what the street was expecting. And at the same time, when we look at the core fee income, now that has gone down almost by 35%. That is a bit of a concern. Credit cost, again, it was a little elevated, but at the same time, it has declined almost by 75 basis points. Slippages, they have remained elevated, and company is saying that MFI slippages specifically are elevated and they are likely to ease off in third and fourth quarter. Other than that, profit declined almost by 72% on a year-on-year basis, a little lower than what the street is expecting. Now, what bank is saying is that they have around 48,000 crores of surplus liquidity, and that is going to help the bank. Other than that, they are also saying that the OPEX is likely to grow at a slower pace. But what remains actually a negative is that there were no triggers for the ROAs going ahead. What is happening is that the entire the OPEX actually is likely to come down, but at the same time fee income is also likely to come down. Other than that, the management commentary did not suggest any kind of boost coming up in the profitability, although they are saying that they are going to remain profitable, but brokerages do not seem to be very much bullish about it. In fact, all the brokerages, they have not changed any kind of guidance or any kind of the target price. We have got JP Morgan, who has underweight trading with the 550 rupees target. What they're saying is that PPOP is likely to remain subdued at least for the next 3 years. So definitely that is one of the concern that brokerages have right now. So in terms of number, we were expecting weak set of numbers and bank has delivered fairly well, but in terms of the outlook, we are still not sure how the bank is going to do in the next few quarters.
Keep an eye out on IndusInd Bank. Gaurav, thank you for that update. In fact, let's listen in to what the lender's chairman Sunil Mehta had to say during the analyst conference call last evening.
During Q1, the board and the management have spent considerable time and effort towards resolving the concerns relating to legacy, treasury and microfinance issues as identified in the previous quarter. The financial impact of the legacy issue is thus now behind us.
Keep an eye out on IndusInd Bank today. The stock, though, has recovered significantly from its 52-week low. Take a short break. Up next, we get you all the updates from all the overnight action that we saw on Wall Street. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. On to action from Wall Street then, and it was a subdued session on the US markets. The S&P 500 ended near the flat line, as did the Dow Jones and as did the Nasdaq as well. The Nasdaq, of course, gaining slightly, 0.3% higher, but the other two indices ending one at the flat line and one below the flat line, and that's because investor enthusiasm on that US-European Union deal was muted despite the futures suggesting otherwise. CNBC's Mackenzie Sigalos gets us a wrap of all the action on Wall Street.
U.S. markets were mixed across the major indexes in Monday trading after President Trump's weekend announcement that the U.S. and European Union had agreed to the framework of a new trade deal. The Dow was down 64, the S&P 500 was up 1, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq gained 70 points. President Trump said today the baseline tariff rate for countries that don't negotiate a deal with the U.S. will likely be between 15 and 20%. That figure represents an increase from the 10% baseline tariff the president announced back in April. The deadline for a deal is Friday, August 1st. Dozens of countries have still not reached an agreement with the U.S. The comments came after he announced a trade deal with the European Union that imposes a 15% duty on most European goods to the U.S., including cars. Tesla entered into a $16.5 billion contract with Samsung. The South Korean tech giant will supply semiconductors to the electric vehicle company, according to social media posts from Tesla CEO Elon Musk. Now, according to a regulatory filing, the effective start date of the contract was July 26th, and it will run through December 2033. Samsung earlier said that details of the deal, including the name of the counterparty, would not be disclosed until the end of 2033, citing a request from the second party to, quote, protect trade secrets. That's what's happening here in the U.S. Back to you in Mumbai.
Mackenzie, thank you for that update. Meanwhile, top US and Chinese economic officials met in Stockholm for more than 5 hours of talks aimed at resolving long-standing economic disputes at the center of a trade war between the two nations, seeking to extend a truce by 3 months. Donald Trump earlier previewed the talks with China, stating that US has quote-unquote a good relationship and hoped that China would open up amid tariff negotiations. CNBC's Eunice Yoon brings us the details on China's requirements from the ongoing negotiations.
China is reiterating the Commerce Minister's recent remarks that there is no reason to return to a trade war. The minister said practice has proven that through dialogue and consultation, we can properly manage contradictions. So the Foreign Ministry repeated that today, saying that the Sweden talks can reduce misjudgments and strengthen cooperation. And this comes after a weekend editorial with Xinhua, the state-run news agency, was playing up what it described as the mutual benefits of these talks, pointing to China processing export control applications. It didn't say specifically that that was about rare earths, but that's what it's about. And the rare earths were processed for U.S. industry. And then it's also mentioned that the U.S. lifted what it described as relevant restrictions on China. So that means that China, again, didn't explicitly say that this is about AI chips, but China does now have the ability to access H20 NVIDIA chips, which had been previously banned, at least the export to China. So in terms of the expected agenda items from a Chinese perspective, there's a lot of belief that we are going to see an extension of the August 12th deadline, possibly by 90 days. Also that China would push for a reduction in the so-called fentanyl tariffs. The Chinese believe that these tariffs that were put as sort of a punishment for their non-cooperation from the U.S. perspectives on fentanyl as unfair. And then the Chinese our expectation is that the Russian oil purchases are going to come up just because the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent had flagged that as a talking point. State media, though, has already been flagging that they will be pushing back on that last point, saying that if Bessent uses this issue to put pressure on China, it will likely cause the newly established trade consultation mechanism to collapse. This is in the Global Times, the Communist Party paper, saying that China would not just, quote, go along with Russian oil cuts. Guys?
Eunice Yoon, thank you for that update. Meanwhile, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer says that the U.S. is in an incredible position with regards to a deal with China, but does not expect any substantial outcome just yet. Listen to what he said.
The U.S. is in an incredible position. We've spent the past 3 months trying to reorder global trade to make sure we can get rid of these systemic imbalances that have persisted. We now have deals with the EU, Japan, and a number of partners. So we come into these negotiations with a strong hand. Our discussions with the Chinese are always cordial and constructive. This is the third round in the past 3 months. So just the fact that we're talking and we want to move forward in a positive way is its own good sign. I don't expect some kind of enormous breakthrough today. What I expect is continued monitoring and checking in on the implementation of our agreement thus far, making sure that key critical minerals are flowing between the parties and setting the groundwork for enhanced trade and balanced trade going forward.
Jamieson Greer also spoke on the US-India trade front, and here's what he had to say on that.
I think the thing to understand with India is their trade policy for a very long time has been premised on strongly protecting their domestic market. That's just how they do business over there. And the president is in a mode of wanting deals that substantially open other markets, that they open everything or near everything. So we continue to speak with our Indian counterparts. We've always had very constructive discussions with them. They have expressed strong interest in opening portions of their market. We, of course, are willing to continue talking to them. But I think that, we need some more negotiations on that end with our Indian friends to see how ambitious they want to be.
The important update there on the US-India trade deal. Take a short break. Cues from the commodities market on the other side. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and Manisha Gupta now joins in with all the updates from the commodity space. Manisha, good morning. Some rise in oil prices, rise in the dollar. What are you picking up today?
Oh, well, absolutely. There have been big moves in many of these commodities in the overnight market. And I'll start with crude oil prices because we've seen gains of 2% overnight. And with that, we're trading at a one-week highs, and $70 a barrel is back for the Brent crude prices. Well, the U.S. president has now cut the days for Russia. It has said that 10 to 12 days to agree on ceasefire or face sanctions. I mean, that is what is adding premium to prices. In the meanwhile, you also have seen the dollar index gain to a one-week highs, and that has kind of weighed on various commodities. Gold, for one, is trading at a three-week lows. You had the copper prices slipping quite sharply overnight. COMEX fell 3%. LME copper fell 1% as well. The markets now are awaiting details of tariffs, which is on from 1st of August in terms of products, countries, the metal in transit, what happens to that. So all of those details is something that the street is still awaiting. In the meanwhile, you also have the U.S. Fed meeting. The two-day meeting starts today. The announcement comes in tomorrow. But the tone, guidance, etc., and ahead of that, some profit-taking in the commodities which had run up too much is exactly what we are seeing today.
Moving along expected lines. Manisha, thank you for that update. On to some tragic news now. A person opened fire inside a Manhattan skyscraper in New York, housing the NFL headquarters and offices of several major financial firms, including private equity giant Blackstone. The incident left several people injured before the suspect was neutralized, as per officials. The incident sees 6 casualties, including the gunman and an NYPD official, along with 4 civilians. The specific motives for the shooting remain under investigation. With that, we'd call time on this edition of Power Breakfast. From me and the team that put this show together, thank you so much for watching. Bazaar Morning Call on the other side to set you up for today's trade.